Deb Dana LCSW, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you. It's really a delight to be here with you.
Well, thank you. It's really good to have you on the show. We're going to be discussing your 2018 book, The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy, Engaging the Rhythm of Regulation. And who did you write this book for? Who was the audience that you had in your mind?
You know, I wrote this book for my fellow clinicians and colleagues all over the world because I teach workshops on polyvagal theory, bringing it into therapy, and everybody wanted to know a little bit more. And how do you do this? And what would you do with this? And so out of those workshops came the idea to put it in book form so that I could reach more people and people would have it as a resource. So it really is aimed at the clinician, and then for the clinician to understand polyvagal theory in a user-friendly way so that they can then bring that to their clients.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that as a social worker, as your background, how much of this neuroscience you've gotten under your belt. I mean, your book is, you go deeply into it all.
I have always been a neuroscience geek, so have always been reading the neuroscience, and I'm fortunate. My office here is located near a medical school that has a neuroscience department, and so we have collaborated with the researchers there to put on programs and go into the lab, and actually spent a couple of evenings in the histology lab sectioning human brains, which was a fascinating experience for those of us who are therapists and work with this organ all the time. It was fascinating to see it and hold it. But so when I read Steve's book, it was as if, oh, there's the missing piece for me. You know, it made sense all of a sudden, the rest of what I was seeing with my clients. So,
yeah, because you were already a therapist before you discovered his work.
Yes.
And what was the work that you were doing then?
So I'm trained in sensory motor psychotherapy as well as internal family systems and tapas acupressure techniques. So those were my models of therapy, and you know, always teaching my clients about their brain systems on top of that. So that was my my way of working with clients. I had a specialty in working with sexual abuse treatment. My group worked with sexual abuse in family systems, and so we worked with the survivors of abuse as well as the people who had offended, because it usually happens in a family system. So we had created a model of working with that. And again, when we found polyvagal theory, it was one of those aha moments, like, oh, this is really going to help us understand client responses and how to create more safety in family systems. So
yeah, so you were working in, I'm going to turn off my phone here. I thought I had, but it's buzzing enough to irritate me.
Yeah, a little distracting.
Yeah. So you were working in the general field of trauma then.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you discovered polyvagal theory. I actually interviewed Stephen Porges about his polyvagal theory back in 2011.
Just after his book came out, yes.
Yeah, that's been some time ago. Maybe you can refresh my memory and that of my listeners by taking us through the broad outlines of the polyvagal theory.
Sure. So polyvagal theory, Steve's brilliant work, outlines the 3 states of the autonomic nervous system and the hierarchy that we travel all the time through those states. So what I like to say is the 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory are hierarchy, neuroception, and co-regulation. And hierarchy is that ventral vagal at the top of the hierarchy that helps us do this, be in connection, safe and social. And then the sympathetic nervous system is the next step backwards on the hierarchy, which brings fight and flight mobilization. And then finally, the earliest step on the evolutionary hierarchy is the dorsal vagal system, which takes us into collapse, conservation, dissociation, numbing, disconnection. So we have those three states. And what I love about the nervous system is it's the common denominator for all of us. We all have a nervous system that moves through those three states
Yeah.
all the time. So that, understanding where you are on that hierarchy is an important piece of understanding behaviors and beliefs. And what I did was take Steve's work and put it on my foundation metaphor is a ladder. So I put it on the autonomic ladder. So at the bottom of the ladder is dorsal. And if you move up to the middle is sympathetic. And then at the top of the ladder is ventral vagal. So the question for clients becomes, where are you on the ladder? And it's a very easy way for them to identify, oh, I'm in sympathetic right now, which means I have too much energy flooding my system and I really need to do something to bring myself back to ventral. So that's hierarchy. And then neuroception, which is the second organizing principle, is the way that our nervous system detects cues of safety and danger without awareness. So it's running in the background all the time. It's subcortical, so it doesn't involve our thinking brain. So neuroception, which is the word Steve coined for this process, is taking in cues in what I say is inside, outside, and between. So cues from inside my body, cues from outside in the environment, and cues from between two people. So that is always happening. So you can begin to see we have a lot going on that's running in the background, moving us either towards or away from connection with people. And then the third, co-regulation, is that sense, that need, that biological imperative we all have to be safely connected with another human. We come into the world with that need. We come into the world wired for that. And that need never goes away, until the day we die. So finding others to feel safe and connected with is an important part of our human living, and is also a part that many of our clients have such difficulty with. So,
Yeah, you've mentioned a bunch of terms here that we may revisit.
Yes.
So it's a lot about safety, right?
It's all about safety, yes, really.
Yeah.
Steve said safety is the treatment, which is a lovely way of thinking about it. And the other day he told me, the body will reorganize when it feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is all about bringing that embodied sense of safety, because safety is not about thinking I'm safe. Safety is about an embodied sense, and my nervous system bringing me that sense of safety, which is that ventral vagal experience.
Yeah, yeah. And you're working with trauma, and it seems to me that the concept of trauma has gotten broadened over the years, because I think when I first encountered it, trauma was about returning veterans, who had suffered horrible things in war, in one war or another, victims of accidents, real accidents, and so on, and sexual trauma, sexual abuse.
Yes.
It seems like as time has gone on, it's gotten expanded to where, are we all victims of trauma now?
Well, as a trauma therapist, I look at the world through that lens. People, trauma is an experience that overwhelms your physiology, that overwhelms your nervous system's ability to regulate, and then the definition of trauma really has expanded to include acts of omission, which are things that are done to us, and then acts of commission, which are the things that are done to us, but also acts of omission. So when we have a neglectful caregiver or an absent parent, that's also traumatic. So we have, loss of loved ones. We have loss of safe places to live. We have war trauma. We have so much now that if we look at trauma simply through the lens of, is it overwhelming my ability to regulate? Is it overwhelming my physiology? And then that creates limiting beliefs and distressing behaviors. Then we all experience some sort of trauma throughout our lifetimes. I do think,
Yeah, of course, Otto Rank going way back, believe that the act of being born,
Born
we
was
all suffered a kind of birth trauma there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
interesting how our understanding of trauma keeps developing, and I'm struck by we have had a lot of people writing significantly about trauma, so that our understanding of it, it seems to me, is becoming more nuanced. And polyvagal theory, I don't think it overturned anything, did it? But more, it sharpened our understanding.
Yeah, and added the piece that had been missing for trauma clinicians was an understanding of the dorsal vagal immobilization and dissociation response, because trauma had been thought of as being a response of the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic was thought of to be the rest and digest system. So Steve's work really identified that there are two parts to the parasympathetic nervous system. There is the ventral vagal, which helps us connect and be in safety and with others. But there's also this very old, ancient part of the same vagus nerve that takes us out of connection into isolation and disconnection, into shutdown. So understanding that is incredibly helpful as a trauma clinician, because sympathetic response and dorsal vagal are very different.
So you talk about dorsal vagal and ventral vagal, and I think of dorsal as meaning what? Behind, or at the bottom of, and ventral is more of the front. So does this relate somehow to the anatomy of the dorsal nerve?
So the vagus nerve, cranial nerve
Vagus nerve,
10,
I meant, yes.
yeah, begins in your medulla, and then travels a wandering route throughout your body down to your digestive system. And why it's dorsal and ventral, the two nuclei where the vagus nerve begins, the dorsal nuclei was the first. And then as we evolved, as evolution came along, so if the dorsal vagus was around 500 million years ago, and then the sympathetic nervous system around 400 million years ago, and then around 200 million years ago, the ventral vagus came into being, and the nuclei of that part of the vagus was just in front of the dorsal vagus. So that's how it got to be ventral. So it's where the nuclei is in the brainstem that does the ventral and dorsal. And
so it's interesting that you can talk about the age of these systems. I assume that's from comparative studies of different animals, and that we begin to see the appearance of these features as we move up the
as we move up the timeline. And so as the timeline, it also created this hierarchy, because one system just got built on top of the other. And the vagus in its total is comprised of both the ventral and the dorsal. Mostly from the diaphragm upward is the realm of the ventral, and from the diaphragm downward is the realm of the dorsal. So it helps us to understand issues our clients have with irritable bowel and digestion and all of that, because it's a dorsal vagal experience. The dorsal vagus runs our digestive system.
Fascinating. And you point out that the vagal nerve is the longest nerve in the body.
Yep, aptly named the vagus, because it's for wanderer in Latin. Yeah, wanders throughout our body. It's a lovely.
I had an experience with a friend that I will share here. We were actually a really wonderful friend and person in the mental health field. And we were smoking pot. We don't get to see each other very often, and we're not big druggies, but we were smoking marijuana and just having a wonderful time singing old folk songs. And he was also drinking some red wine. And at one point, I didn't know what was happening, but his eyes rolled back in his head, and I thought he was having a stroke. I kind of froze up. I like to think of myself as heroic, but I didn't know what to do. And then his wife happened to come in, and she said, "Oh my God!" and she called for emergency help. And they laid him out on the floor, gradually he kind of came to. So later he told me, after he had the medical workup, that he had a vagal attack.
So
what is that?
Well, and we have a lovely word for fainting, vasovagal syncope, which really is fainting, right?
Oh.
Which means that your dorsal vagal system has taken control of your physiology and puts you into conservation mode. So shuts everything down, shuts your systems down. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. And when you said, you'd like to think you were heroic, your nervous system acted in its own heroic way by bringing you into a freeze response, right?
Yeah.
We don't get to choose.
I really strongly relate to that freeze response. To share more of my person here.
Yeah.
There have been a few times when I was, one time in particular, in a kind of romantic relationship with a woman, and she's pressing me, once more from this relationship, and she's hammering on me about this. And, I've got a PhD in psychology. I can't think of a word to say. I can't come up with any defense, which only makes her more frustrated and more angry. Right? I think this is kind of an archetypal experience.
You begin to see the way your two nervous systems were dancing together, right? Her system was getting more sympathetically charged, wanting more, more, more. And your nervous system was going more into freeze, freeze, freeze.
I was like that little animal that's playing dead. Somehow inside.
Yeah. So she's sympathetic, you're dorsal, and nobody's ventral. There's no ventral energy in the room. And we have to have ventral energy in the room in order to find our way out of things together, right?
When you talk about the ventral energy, it's reminding me of the hormone that's associated with the vagal system, oxytocin. And they've called that the compassion hormone or the love hormone. Tell us a bit about that.
That really is Sue Carter's area of expertise. Sue is Steve Porges' wife, and she.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, she is the one.
Sue Carter is in positive psychology, right?
No, Sue Carter. No, Sue Carter, she's now the director of the Kinsey Institute. And she was the one who discovered the role of oxytocin in pair bonding in prairie voles. So she was the original really researcher around oxytocin and connection. So they make quite the wonderful couple, don't they? Polyvagal and oxytocin. So and I think, Steve would say there are lots of oxytocin receptors in the dorsal vagal system because, again, in order to be intimate, we need to come into that immobilization state, which is dorsal vagal, but do it without fear. So it's as if our ventral vagal and our dorsal vagal are in connection at that point, because ventral brings the ability to be safe, and dorsal brings that ability to immobilize. So that's a lovely combined state. Yeah.
By the way, I hope you'll throw in any case examples. I've given myself now twice.
Yes, you have.
Any case examples that come to mind?
Well, the thing I love, one of the things I love most about polyvagal theory is helping clients understand the power of their ventral vagal system and understanding how they move through their states. I was working with a woman this morning. We've been working together for many years, and she's just some good things have just happened in her life, and we were celebrating. We were taking the time to really savor the experiences and really bring that ventral vagal state alive and make memory of it so she could bring it alive again later when, of course, down the road there are going to be moments when there are challenges to the good things that are happening. But what she said to me, which I thought was interesting, was, I think you've had more faith in my abilities than anyone else in my life. And I said, well, because I know the power of ventral vagal that exists in all of us. And I truly could feel that your system was alive and well and just needed support to help you move through the difficult times you were in. And I think as someone who really understands polyvagal and can help their clients understand that, that's a powerful message to send to our trauma survivor clients. You know, that this biological resource exists inside you, and we can help bring it to life so that when you are in ventral vagal or have a toe dipping in ventral vagal, you can then start to see options and start to move in the ways that are going to be healthy for you.
Seems like a lot of your work is teaching the client, partly teaching a vocabulary for understanding what's going on in their body, and teaching them to monitor it and be aware of it. In ways that they haven't been because they didn't have the vocabulary and they hadn't really turned inward enough to have that experience. Right.
So yes, my work begins with teaching the basics of polyvagal, and then we move into a mapping process where each client maps their particular nervous system and gets to know their 3 states, because the process around using polyvagal is really the ability to notice a name. And you can't notice a name until you start to befriend your nervous system. So we get to know their 3 states, and then the guiding question becomes, what does your nervous system need in this moment to help you feel safe and to help you, be in contact with your ventral vagal system?
So when we're in interacting with the world, interacting with other people, we are constant. What I get from your book is that we are constantly in flux of moving toward, moving away, of degrees of safety,
Yes.
And yes, so that's really very interesting, and it's a new vocabulary. I'm almost thinking of other systems, that people have invoked for understanding ourselves as far out as whether it be astrology or the tarot or some other system,
And really, finding a common language is the basis of how we communicate. And so, yes, I teach my clients and they teach their families. And oftentimes clients will say, can I bring my husband or my partner or my child with me? I said, sure, bring them in and we'll all map. And because it's creating a shared language that is the starting point. And, so, and we were just talking about this moving towards or away, the nuance of that. It reminded me of the other concept that is so important and often hard to understand about the vagal brake, which is the way the ventral vagal system relaxes a little bit so that we allow more sympathetic energy to be felt in our system, but doesn't give up control to the sympathetic nervous system. So we feel a little more energized, mobilized when the vagal brake releases, and then when it re-engages, we feel a little more calm. So that is always going on as well. Right.
So I'm trying to get a picture of this vagal brake.
Now,
the idea of a brake is that it slows something down. If you press on the brake, it slows it down. If you let up, you're going faster.
Yeah, that's good. So I often use I use the hand brakes on a bicycle to have my clients get a feeling for it. So, when we're start going down the hill and we want to go a little faster, we release the brake a little bit. But then when it feels like it's just a bit too dangerous, we put the brakes back on a little bit, and then we can release to go a little faster and put them back on. And that's the role of the vagal brake, to keep you in your ventral vagal window, but to allow you to have more energy and come back to calm when you need.
So it's something that we have some control over.
We can we can. It works in the background, but we can actively engage, release, and re-engage the vagal brake. Yes. Yeah, and we do it in many ways. One of the easiest ways to change your state is through your breath. So your breath is acting, is engaging or disengaging your vagal brake, right? And in fact, every time you breathe in, your vagal brake releases just a little bit and your heart rate speeds up. And every time you exhale, the vagal brake re-engages a bit and your heart rate slows down. So I had a client who told me she thought her vagal brake was broken. And I said, well, it's really not, because every breath cycle, it's working for you.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
Because for years, I think therapists have called the client's attention to their breath. And
Yes.
if they're starting to get kind of panicky, they say,
Yes.
let's pause a second here and have you
Mhm.
take some deep breaths.
Right, right, right.
So,
So
so this gives us a neurological
exactly.
understanding of what's
Yes.
going on there.
Yes. And I think that's the gift of polyvagal theory. It's not it's not a replacement for any of the modes of therapy that we're using. It's a platform that sits underneath them, because it gives the scientific explanation for many of the things that we're already doing. And clients find it incredibly helpful to understand their physiology, to know that, oh, so my system is working in the way it's supposed to. It was shaped this way from my experience, and we can reshape it. Yes, that's a hopeful understanding for
Sure,
therapists and clients. Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And I've heard that said about neuropsychotherapy in general, that
Mm.
uh, there are a lot of people doing neuropsychotherapy now that may not be talking about the vagal system, but they're talking about other
Mm-hmm.
brain systems and
Right.
helping people to understand what's going on.
Right, right.
And
So
sort
we'll
of the
invite them to add the autonomic nervous system to their
yeah, yeah,
teaching, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
now going back to the breath, that's very interesting to me
yeah,
because I used to
yeah.
do yoga and teach yoga.
Right. Absolutely.
And the
Mhm.
breath is very important there. And I'm remembering the
Yes.
early days of biofeedback as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that before biofeedback, the thought was that the autonomic nervous system was beyond our control.
Right. Right. Right.
And then it turns out that the breath is that doorway
Yes. Yes.
between the two, and that with biofeedback training, people can learn to
Right.
exert some control over parts of the system that previously they didn't think people could control.
Exactly. Exactly. And then we can, resource ways to bring more ventral vagal energy into our systems through connection with safe others, through experiences in nature. There are lots of ways, and each person finds their own to bring more of that regulation into the system, so we can actively um, um, look for those opportunities and understand that connection with another safe person is one of the most direct ways to get there. You know, that
Yeah,
interactive regulation that we come into the world needing and learn how to do, hopefully in our early life. Many trauma survivors don't, and have to move instead to self-regulation, right? So we
yeah,
have to we
yeah.
have to remember that the co-regulation is often a missing piece, and is a piece that has to be there in order for life to be full.
So that's getting into the area of friendship, of
Mm-hmm,
romantic
mm-hmm,
attachment,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, yeah,
understanding the neural substrate of
right,
yeah,
right. And the research on loneliness is pretty incredible, and shows that, you know, perceived loneliness, not even actual loneliness, but perceived loneliness has physical and psychological consequences.
yes,
Fair-
right.
fair- And so, you know, what we're again talking about, an autonomic nervous system that is longing to be in connection with another nervous system, you know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm. And for many clients for whom relationships have been dangerous, you know, saying, you know, it's a physiological need to connect with another, you know, physiological mammal,
Yeah.
begins to help them see it in perhaps a slightly different way.
Yeah, I'm thinking of attachment theory now too. And again,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
and it interlocks nicely with what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
neither one supplants the other, but
Right. Right.
it gives us a basis for understanding
Yeah.
how that attachment is working.
Yes. Yes.
I'm very interested in the topic of loneliness because
Mm-hmm.
I think we're both in that age group where
Mm-hmm. Yes.
loneliness looms.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so
Why?
finding.
Yeah. One of the things I'm noticing is that it's more difficult to form
Mm-hmm.
deep relationships at this point in life than earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that? What can we do about it?
I don't know why that is, but think about when you're around other people, and your nervous system is this internal surveillance system, and it's looking around to see, who might I want to approach, and who doesn't feel so safe. It's really about safety or danger, and it's picking up cues from people's tone of voice, from your eyes, from your head gestures. That's what the nervous system is looking for, and it makes this unconscious decision. And sometimes we don't even understand why. Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
You can bring some thought to it later, but your nervous system is really guiding you in making these choices, and your nervous system has been shaped by your life history. So it's making choices based on your history.
I think it may be different for males than for females, because my sense of that is as males, we've had to gird our loins, so to speak, for battle. Now, for women too, I guess in a different way, that women have reasons to be fearful of men. Men have reasons to be fearful of men because, we see it in nature, right?
Yep.
Butting heads and so on.
Yeah.
So there's always that kind of scanning as a male going on. Is this safe? Is this person safe?
Right.
And
that scanning is going on for every human.
Yeah.
In that moment, your nervous system is asking that question: is this person safe in this moment?
Yeah.
So, to bring some awareness to that is helpful, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, your work has focused on trauma, but I know that you've co-edited another book with Steve Porges that is a collection of papers I gather from a variety of therapists who are maybe working in areas not directly related to trauma.
Steve asked me if I'd co-edited a book with him, and I, of course, said yes, not knowing at all what I was getting into. But and then, we found a group of people around the world who were polyvagal-informed in the work they were doing, and Steve met them in his talks or came across them in conversations and invited them to write a chapter for our book. And so we then set about trying to add the more explicit polyvagal theory language to what they were doing, so that people could really see that the work they were doing was using the theory in these specific ways. So we have people from all sorts of clinical disciplines. We have nurses and doctors, and we have a veterinarian, we have a neonatologist, we have people talking about grief, about working with torture survivors, all sorts of people who really are bringing the theory to life, which is what Steve has always wanted. He created a theory, not a model, and really has invited people everywhere to take his theory and create with it.
Now, one of the things that you touch on in your book is the relationship of the autonomic nervous system to sound, the sounds we hear around us. And somehow, in my interview with Steve, we got around to discussing the fact that we both have tinnitus.
Oh, I listened to your interview, and he said afterwards he was going to talk to you. Did he?
He said what?
He said after you were done with the interview, he was going to talk to you about tinnitus.
Oh yes, that's it. Right. So we did talk about it, and I see he's developed something, a whole program that relates to sound. Although in what I found, I didn't see any mention of tinnitus. So maybe give me an update on his tinnitus, whether or not he's found something that worked for him?
That I don't know. I can't give you that update. But the
Okay.
safe and sound listening protocol that he developed and is now out there in the world for clinicians to be trained in and used is quite wonderful. And it's he has remastered music, 5 hours of music, so that you listen to it in a sequence, and it exercises your auditory pathways. It brings alive your social engagement system, which is the eyes, the face, the connection here through those auditory pathways in a gentle exercising, a stretching, so that at first it may be melodic, and then it's a higher frequency and a lower frequency, and it's quite amazing. There are 700 or 800 clinicians around the world who are now trained in it and using it, and we're starting to get more research on outcomes with trauma survivors. So,
Using it for what?
well, he began. It was focused on working with children who were on the spectrum. So he had some great results with helping kids with autism reduce some of their behaviors and be able to be engaged with parents and teachers. So that's where it started. But then, of course, because we therapists want to try everything, people started using it with, with just their regular old clients, and we all tried it ourselves and said, "Oh, this is interesting." So now it's really being used for a number of different issues, and we should have more data around it in a while. Actually, my husband is using it just 15 minutes a day, and we noticed that he's more able to maintain eye contact and have a smile and social engagement. So it's acting on his social engagement system in the same ways it does for kids with autism or trauma survivors.
Yeah, you shared with me that your husband had had a stroke. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying this is helpful in rebuilding.
It seems to be. So,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how it's working yet, but it's nice that it's working, because one of the things the social engagement system looks for, our nervous system looks for, a face that is mobile, right? And so a flat face is an automatic cue of danger to your nervous system. So if you think about people who have more of a neutral face, it's really a cue of danger. And a voice that does not have prosody and frequency and music to it is a cue of danger. These are just wired in cue of dangers for our nervous system. So, you begin to think about some of the people in your life who may have trouble maintaining relationships, and you might think, I see that they really don't have much expression in their face.
Yeah.
And that causes other nervous systems to feel danger and people to move away without them ever knowing why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm coming back to that gender difference. Women are very expressive in their faces and voices, much more expressive than on average than men on average.
Yeah.
And I'm aware, sometimes I feel badly that my face is way too static.
Well, you could work with that.
Yeah, I'll try to do that.
See, there's your gorgeous smile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
Let's see, where else do we want to go here? I had a whole bunch of questions written
And
out,
we've wandered all over the place.
but
So
it's more fun being the
good.
wandering vagal nerve and
Yes, it
going
is. Yes,
all
it is.
around.
I agree.
Yeah. There were some phrases that I particularly like.
Oh.
One place you talk about patterns of connection versus
Yes.
patterns of protection.
Yeah, yeah. And that really, I like that phrase too, and my clients really respond to that, because, those patterns of connection get created when we are with a safe other, usually from our early experience on up. So in therapy, what we're helping to do with our clients is to help them create new patterns of connection in the therapy relationship, and to then begin to explore outside of therapy where are some other places we can find some patterns of connection. And in order to be in patterns of connection, we have to relax our survival responses, right? So we can't be in both. So in order to come into connection, I have to relax my survival responses. And that's pretty scary for many people in the beginning of therapy, for many people in daily living, that, oh, I have to relax. And what I like to tell people is you can be regulated, you can be in connection and be alert. Those go together beautifully, but you can't be in connection and have that sympathetic alarm bell going off, right? So you can be alert but not alarmed, and there's the subtle nuance difference there.
Yeah.
When I'm alert, I'm still with you and I'm still thinking clearly and I can take action and I'm organized. But when I'm alarmed and my sympathetic nervous system is taking control, then I'm in fight or flight.
Now you're doing workshops, training workshops with therapists in different parts of the world. You just came back from France where you were doing one.
Yeah.
And how do you focus on training therapists to come across less threatening?
Yeah, yes, great question. So my workshops, the first thing I tell my participants is you thought you were going to come here to learn about how to work with your clients, but you're really going to learn about your own nervous system, because it starts with answering the question, what does my nervous system need in this moment, right? So it's an inside out learning. We have to know our own nervous system intimately in order to then be safe for our clients. So, we're talking about long ago. We think long ago clinicians were taught to have a neutral face,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Very dangerous to a client's nervous system. Neutral is often perceived as dangerous because there aren't enough cues for the nervous system to know what's going on, right? So even someone who has a threatening face is easier for the nervous system to deal with because I know that's dangerous, but neutral is confusing. And so, we want to be extending the cues of safety to our clients through our look, through our voice, through proximity, through the environment. So I like doing long trainings because it really gives clinicians a chance to settle into the work and try it out and come back. So I have a 52-hour training program that I run for clinicians that really helps them become polyvagal-informed therapists. And then the shorter ones, I tell them are immersions, and you're going to change state many, many times in 2 days and get the flavor of what it's like to be a client who can't stay in ventral and can't find the cues of safety. And that experience is profound. When
You
we
have them pair up and give each other feedback.
Yes, yeah. Because it's really about co-regulation. So we do a lot of work in dyads because that's what the nervous system wants. It wants to be paired up with another nervous system.
Yeah.
And then experiment with what feels safe and what feels dangerous. One of the exercises, I have a worksheet that is the Goldilocks graph. And we're looking for what's too much for the nervous system, what's not enough for the nervous system, and what's just right. And that changes from person to person, and it changes from day to day. Because one day, this may feel just right to me, and the next day, it may feel too much. So it's a moving target, and I think that's the piece we want to remember that.
Earlier, you were talking about getting people to build a map, draw a map.
Yes.
I know in the book you mentioned there are 3 kinds of maps that each person. And I should mention before I forget that your book is full of exercises and sort of exercises, meditations. There's lots to do.
lots to do to get to know your nervous system. And so yes, the 3 maps. The first map is the personal profile map, where you get to know your 3 states, and it answers the question, where am I? So that's the basic one. I can then say, where am I on this map? And then the second map is the triggers and glimmers map, and the triggers are those things that take us into sympathetic or dorsal. And glimmers, I love the glimmers. Glimmers are those little micro moments that bring us to ventral. So, and important in our work with clients to have them notice the glimmers too. So that second map answers the question, what brings me here? So the first is where am I? The second is what brings me here. And the third is the regulating resources map, which answers the question, how do I get back to ventral? And the regulating resources has both interactive resources and self resources because we need both.
So how do people make this map? Is it a pencil and paper exercise?
It's colorful because I think color is a lovely thing to add. So the map template, all the templates are available when you buy the book. That I have them on my website. You can download the templates, and it's a ladder down the left-hand side with the three states listed and then divided, and I take them through the process of each state, and we bring that state alive just a little bit for sympathetic and dorsal, and then we begin to say, so we could play with yours for a moment if you want. Just
okay, we'll try that.
So let's think about a time recently when you felt a little bit of that sympathetic, mobilizing fight-flight energy in your system.
Fight, flight.
Yeah, mobilizing, overwhelmed, too much energy flooding your system.
Okay, this is going to be a real trivial one, but I was at the movies and there was a guy, roughly around my age eating a huge amount of popcorn, and he was in the seat in front of me. So I couldn't help but see him and his white hair head and so on. And he's eating the popcorn like this huge handful. And I'm trying to pay attention to the movie and get into the plot. He's doing this. And I'm having all these judgments are coming up,
Yes. I can feel it in my system as you're talking.
I'd like to box him on the ears or say something to him, but I don't because then there's possibility of male aggression,
So there was some wise part that said, don't do that.
Right.
But when you were in that state, notice what was happening in your body. What did you feel in your body?
Agitated, distracted.
And what
hoping that I could ignore it and forget about it and really get into the movie.
Yes. And then what were some of your emotions?
Irritation, something just pretty close to anger, but sort of sub-anger.
Yes. And then what were some of your beliefs? What were some of your thoughts?
That he's an asshole.
Right. So, and already you can see how when we're in a sympathetic state, connection and compassion and curiosity about the other is not possible, right? Because your physiology does not support it. And that's what we want to help people understand, that the emergent properties of sympathetic or dorsal do not support connection and curiosity. They support survival responses, right?
Some part of my mind was trying to, would this be an example of the dorsal brake? Some part of my mind was trying to remind me to take a larger view. And also,
yes, you had a toehold in ventral vagal, right?
and also I was reminded of accounts of meditation retreats, multi-day meditation retreats, where some fellow meditator in the group has some supremely annoying thing that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because there's not that much else going on.
Right. Yes. So, and then the two statements that we look at from each state. So when you were in that sympathetic charged place, irritated, frustrated, couldn't get away from that guy, how would you feel in the sentence, the world is?
Full of people like that.
Yes. And the second sentence is I am.
I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go with that.
Just let your nervous system fill that in for you. You're in that place, you're sitting there, you're frustrated, you're annoyed, all that energy. I am
judgmental and irritable.
So
there are not ways I like to present myself.
But when your sympathetic nervous system gets over, we just started to get an understanding of what happens for you, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right. So this is what we do with clients for sympathetic and dorsal, so that they get a flavor of what is happening, what is being pulled up and what is being shut down when they're in those states. And then for ventral, we really bring a ventral vagal moment to life and let it fully fill the body and begin to get to know, oh, what is it like when I'm in ventral? And those two statements, I'm just going to ask you, remember a moment when you're in ventral.
Yeah.
And that's probably pretty easy to do. And you don't even have to tell me about it, but
ventral's when you're feeling blissful, right?
Yeah, connected. For our clients, for our trauma survivor clients, ventral is simply the world's okay, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be nirvana or Zen, but the world's okay, and I can make my way through it safely, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for most people, right? To have that belief that wow, it's okay, and I can make my way safely. And so from that place, the world is what? How would you fill it in from a ventral place? The world is
safe and beautiful and flowering,
and I am.
I am at peace.
Yeah. And I've done thousands of maps now over the course of doing this, and everybody has very similar experiences in the three states. We are very much alike. We humans, in the way that we respond to those three states. So in ventral, I like to, Steve once named it benevolence, and I really do love that term, is the active ongoing use of ventral vagal energy in service of healing. And that, I think, is possible for all of us, to bring our ventral vagal state in service of healing to others, and then the world can be, your beautiful place. And so again, this is our biology either helping us create connection or taking us into survival.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me from all of this is that sense of the ladder, and that we're constantly going up and down the ladder.
Constantly. Yep.
So that there's no stasis from moment to moment. And it reminds me of the micro expressions.
Yes. Yeah. And our goal is not to always be in ventral. That's not a reasonable goal, but our goal is to know when we've left ventral and have ways to get back and transition flexibly back into a ventral vagal state. To make our moments of in the sympathetic storm, or in dorsal vagal despair, as my clients call it, not as intense, not as frequent, and not as long, right?
The word authenticity is coming up. That what being authentic would be to accept that about oneself, and being able, maybe free to express it in one way or another.
Yeah, and to be able to, I work with. There's a process I do with couples, but I also do it with therapists, because these little ruptures happen all the time. These autonomic ruptures happen, and how do we make a repair? And so it's that process of noticing, I've just, acted from my sympathetic or dorsal. That's a rupture, and now I need to make a repair. And how do I make a repair that is felt by that other autonomic nervous system as being authentic and truly freely offered? So, even in those moments, our autonomic nervous system is a great guide for us. So, you go through your day and you probably notice many moments when there's a sense of falling out of connection with someone. That's that moment when two nervous systems had a rupture. And then, not that we have to notice every single minute one, but it's nice to pay attention and say to someone, I'm sorry for what just happened. Or with clients, it's especially important, because these many moments of even looking away and getting distracted And then we come back, the client's nervous system has noticed that. And because 80% of the information comes from the body and goes to the brain, and then because we're meaning-making creatures, the brain then makes a story.
Yeah.
Right? So in that moment of distraction, when I might just have been distracted by something behind the client, and then I come back, if I don't name that and say, here's what happened for me, my client's nervous system dysregulates, feels the rupture, and makes a story about it. And the story is likely not, Deb just got distracted and now she's back, right? The story is likely, I'm too much for her, I'm too toxic, I'm boring her, any of those stories. So it's incumbent on me to notice when that happens and to offer the correct information to my client.
You're reminding me that you described a three-part process where restory
Yes,
is the
restory.
third part.
It is, yes, yes.
To tell yourself a different story.
Right. And we can only restory when we've come back into regulation. Right. So we recognize where we are, we regulate or co-regulate back to ventral, and then the story can change. Because to take your example of the movie theater, while you're still in that sympathetic place, feeling irritated, becoming angry, the story can't change. It's only when you have some ventral vagal energy infusing your system that the story can change. We can restory. Yeah.
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 And I suppose that's what has also gone by the name of reframing, that we can reframe things.
Yeah, we really, a lovely exercise I do with my clients is to take an experience, and it could be a simple experience that doesn't have a lot of charge, and simply look at it through your sympathetic nervous system, and then look at it through your dorsal vagal system, and then look at it through your ventral vagal eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is very different in those three states.
Rashomon.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's, and that's simply your biology working in service of your survival. Right, right. Yeah, because the nervous system doesn't make a judgment about good or bad. It simply acts in service of survival. So.
Again, going back to the safety versus danger.
Yeah. So yes, the more we can offer cues of safety to the people around us, the more they can then come into their own sense of safety, and where then we can be in connection. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, you're very good at this. I felt safe with you from the very beginning.
Good.
And you've got a great smile and a warm presence. So you found your work. Definitely.
It is my passion. I am loving being able to teach polyvagal to so many different places, people, and then hearing stories from those people who email me all the time and say, "Ooh, here's what I did, and I took it to my husband's work, and I took it to my child's school, and I took it to," so it's like just rippling out into the world, which is
gratifying.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we're at the place to wind down. Is there anything that we haven't said, talked about here that you were hoping to get out?
I think we had a lovely wandering conversation, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. I feel energized, and
I'm just going to invite anyone who listens to your wonderful shrink wrap radio to bring their ventral. And what I love to tell my clients and people I teach, and they say they're going to make t-shirts or coffee mugs, I say, beam benevolence. So it's that beaming ventral vagal out into the world. So
okay.
That's what we'll invite.
Deb Dana, thank you for bringing your beaming ventral self to Shrink Wrap Radio.
It was such a joy. Thank you.